Now, joining us now is the New York Post 2024 swing state reporter Victoria Churchill. Victoria, thank you so much for coming on the program. I want to talk to you about the debate and J.D. Vance, who we've sort of not focused on too much because Trump and the debate has taken all the oxygen here. You were in the spin room with Vance after the debate. What did he have to say? How did he say it? How's he looking?
Well, Vance came in, joined us very confidently after Trump's debate with Kamala Harris, but he said what I think a lot of Americans already know, and it's that Kamala Harris is all fluff. She has no substantive policy proposals, and the voters know that, and Trump and Vance and their team are making sure that Americans know that, and if Americans care about policy, they know that the choice they're going to make is going with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in November.
Now, I want to ask you about something that happened in the debate, which suggested that maybe Trump and Vance were at odds over their stance on abortion. Trump tried to distance himself from Vance's claim that Trump would veto a federal abortion ban. Have a look at this.
J.D. Vance has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D. And I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it.
Is this a sign of a possible rift between the two candidates here, or is this just a media kerfuffle?
I believe that it's just a kerfuffle. Look, at the end of the day, for example, if Vance was to, for example, have to cast a tie-breaking vote for something like this in the Senate, obviously as the vice president, you get the tie-breaking vote. He is currently a member of the United States Senate where he has that voting power. He would maintain that in those instances as the vice president. So, I think Vance would probably vote for a national abortion ban, but also that means that they have to get at least 50 other, presumably Republicans, to vote for that. And I don't know even if Republicans do take back the Senate, whether they will be successful in holding that vote because, this issue is very contentious in a lot of states. And I think that means that even some Republicans may not be very much in favor of it, depending on the makeup of their constituency, if right now their campaigning and their outreach is to get a lot of swing demographic voters that aren't necessarily very socially conservative. And, if those senators want to get reelected in 6 years, if this is brought up in the first, if Trump is elected and he's, if it's brought up in the beginnings of his second term, those senators would still have to face voters. So I think there is a lot of hypotheticals in this situation.
Is the abortion issue sort of the Republican equivalent of an issue like immigration is for the Democrats? One of these things where they're deeply divided between what they have to say to people who might be living in sort of urban and suburban centers and, people who are maybe more religious and more conservative on this issue in maybe more rural issues. How does Donald Trump get ahead then of this issue so that he can satisfy both sides?
I think the answer is really twofold. So on one hand, I think he has to lean on his record from his first presidency. This is actually another thing that Vance mentioned, despite how the other members of the media may spin it, this is really a race between a current incumbent and a former president. So both people have a record, which, we don't always see in elections such as this. And so what we have here is Trump has a very solid pro-life record to lean on. And so that will satisfy the social conservatives. Now, on the other hand, I think he's making other comments, about, for example, leaving things up to the states. That, I think, will play better with middle ground voters because at the end of the day, people can split a ticket. They can vote for him for the presidential race, but they could also vote for other people for governor's races, for example. They can vote for their state representatives and state senators. And so, at the end of the day, I don't think necessarily, despite the demographic that I fall into, which is, women under 30, which everybody always loves talking about as being insanely liberal, despite a lot of compatriots that I have in my demographic being very fired up about the abortion issue, I think your everyday voter really isn't. I think the media spins it that way, and that's the perception because of the media. But I also think that actually what's going to decide this election is going to be pocketbook issues. It's going to be safety, or I call it, kind of consider it the three prongs of security: personal security, national security, and economic security. And you know, that's what I'm hearing from voters in swing states as well.
Well, I want to ask you about the swing states. Tell us, where have you been? What swing states have you been covering, visiting? What are the polls like? But the polls are kind of trailing indicators. What is the mood on the ground of people you're talking to? Where are they seeing this going?
So I'm on the eastern seaboard. I am based in Virginia, which actually is kind of in conversations to be a swing state this year. And then I also travel north and south of where I'm at. So I also go to North Carolina, which is just south of Virginia, and then Pennsylvania, which is just north. So those are the three main states of my focus of my reporting at the Post. You know, Pennsylvania, I think everybody's been saying it, so you know, I'm just going to be another voice in that category. But Pennsylvania is the swing state, as well as North Carolina. Actually, Harris is there today, and Trump is not there himself, but he's actually having an event with several surrogates, several congressmen, talking actually about policy. You know, believe it or not, again, I think that's something that voters care about and want to hear about. Folks from. And actually, I think it's very clever that his team is engaging these congressmen because, again, policy, there's only a very limited amount of policy that can come out of the executive branch. There's obviously a lot of policymaking that has to go in Congress, especially if we want that to be codified. And so engaging those members early on that would be leaders, you know, for some of Trump's agenda items, I think is very clever that his team is doing that. But yeah, you know, again, voters, I think, again, how I see it is the security election. It's economic security. You know, people want to know that when they go to work and they work their butts off, that it's actually going to mean that they can afford to live. You know, it's national security. Under Trump, obviously, again, I'm not the first person to say this, but under Trump, we had no new wars. Under Biden, our foreign policy has been a complete mess. And then again, I think personal security, you know, I think that feeds in with the border. Migrants are causing spikes in crime in communities all over this nation. And again, there's the line of every county is a border county. You know, I live in Northern Virginia. That's where I'm based when I'm not traveling with the swing state team. And, you know, our crime rates just, you know, maybe not in my direct neighborhood, but very close to where I live, maybe 20 miles, 10 miles away from where I am, there's illegal immigrants committing crimes. So they're getting through the very porous southern border under the Biden administration, and they're going all over the country and wreaking havoc, and people see that all over the nation.
Victoria, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. Absolutely fascinating. I think that economic security point is going to be huge in Pennsylvania, so we'll watch that with that tax proposal on overtime wages.